The emergency alert flashed across every screen in the Galactic Behavioral Assessment Center simultaneously. Instructor Vic's antenna twitched as she read the message for the third time, hoping the words would somehow rearrange themselves into something that made sense. 7 apex predator cubs, all rescued from different poacher operations across 4 sectors, were displaying psychological profiles that violated every known developmental model in her 40 years of xenopsychology. "This is impossible," Vexari muttered, her mandibles clicking rapidly as she reviewed the assessment data. The cubs should be feral, traumatized, aggressive. Instead, the behavioral scans showed cooperation levels that exceeded even domesticated species norms. Her colleague Pinth leaned over her shoulder, his optical clusters widening. "The Council is demanding an immediate explanation. 3 species recovery programs are on hold until we can verify these results." Vexthar's primary arms gestured sharply. "Schedule emergency evaluations. I want every cub in the observation chamber within the hour and find out who has been handling them. Someone clearly violated protocols." The observation chamber was designed for individual assessments with reinforced barriers and neural dampening fields to prevent aggressive outbursts. Vexthari had never used it for a group evaluation, but the data suggested these cubs had somehow formed a cohesive social unit despite representing 7 different apex predator species from incompatible ecosystems. What she saw when the cubs entered made her thorax seize with professional horror. A Krath cub whose species was known for solitary aggression and had caused 3 handler injuries last month, was gently nudging a smaller Vitor cub forward. The Vitor, whose venomous spine should have been extended defensively, had them completely retracted and was chittering softly in what her translator registered as encouragement. Behind them, a Hyloxian cub whose species literally ate other predators was carrying a Nyx cub on its back like some sort of interspecies transport service by the ancestors. Pinth whispered, "They are actually cooperating." Vexthari activated her recording equipment with trembling digits. "Begin standard behavioral assessment protocol. Cub identification. Herrick's Krath species, age approximately 6 standard months." The small Krath cub looked up at her with eyes that should have shown fear or aggression. Instead, he tilted his head with what appeared to be polite curiosity. "Hello," Herrick said, clearly his translator working perfectly despite the species being notoriously difficult to linguistically integrate. "Are you going to ask us questions we are supposed to answer honestly and use our words?" Vexthari felt her professional foundation cracking. 6-month-old Krath cubs did not speak in complete sentences. They did not understand abstract concepts like honesty. They certainly did not voluntarily choose verbal communication over physical dominance displays. She paused, recalibrating her entire approach. "Yes, I need to understand your behavioral development. Can you tell me who has been caring for you?" All 7 cubs moved in unison, turning to point toward the observation window. Through the reinforced glass, Vexthari could see the facility's cafeteria worker, a human female standing with a tray of what appeared to be fruit and some kind of baked goods. "Nat takes care of us," the Vitor cub said, her voice carrying the kind of certainty that came from absolute security. "She teaches us things, Nena." Vexthar's Antenna straightened in alarm. The cafeteria worker, she is not authorized. For cub interaction, she has no training in xenopsychology or behavioral development protocols. The largest cub, a thoraxian whose species was classified as extreme danger, even in juvenile form, made a sound that her translator rendered as gentle amusement. Nass says, protocols are just fancy words for rules. Someone made up. She says what matters is paying attention to how we actually feel. Vexar's mandibles went completely still. This was worse than she thought. Far worse. Emergency protocols, she said sharply to Pinth. Contact senior behavioral scientist Thunder immediately, and someone get that human out of the observation area before she causes further contamination. Nena is not contamination. Herrick clears throat, said firmly, his small body straightening with surprising dignity. Nena is family. The other cubs vocalized agreement, a chorus of sounds from 7 different species that somehow harmonized into unified support. Vexthari watched as they moved closer together, forming a protective cluster that put the smaller cubs in the center, while the larger ones faced outward toward potential threats. This was not random behavior. This was sophisticated pack structure that crossed every known species barrier. Someone explained to me, Vexari said slowly, her professional voice barely containing her rising panic, how 7 cubs from 7 different apex predator species, all rescued from traumatic situations, all from incompatible ecosystems and contradictory social structures, have formed a functional family unit in less than 3 standard months. Nena helped us, the Hiluxian cub said simply. When we were scared and angry, she sat with us. When we fought, she made us apologize and explain our feelings. When we were sad, she held us and said it was okay to cry. Apex predators do not cry, Vexari said automatically, then stopped as she realized how absurd that sounded in context. We do when we are sad, Herrick corrected gently. Nass says feelings are not weak. She says feelings are just information about what we need. Vexar's world was unraveling with each sentence. These concepts required cognitive development that these cubs should not possess for years. Emotional regulation alone was impossible. The cross-species empathy was theoretically unachievable. The door to the observation chamber opened and Thunder entered with the heavy tread of his Korgathi species. His massive form should have triggered defensive responses from the cubs, but instead they simply watched him with alert curiosity. Vexthari, Thunder rumbled, his deep voice carrying decades of authority. I reviewed your emergency report during transit. I assume you have discovered some critical error in the assessment equipment, because what you described cannot exist in nature. The equipment is functioning perfectly, Vari said tightly. The cubs are the anomaly. Thunder approached the cubs slowly, using standard non-threatening postures. I am senior behavioral scientist Thunder. I need to understand your development. You are very big. The smallest cub, a Nick, barely large enough to have left maternal care, observed, but you are using your gentle voice. Nass says we should notice when people are trying to be kind, even if they look scary. Thunder's fur rippled with surprise. This Nena, the human cafeteria worker, what exactly has she been teaching you? Everything, the Thoraxian cub said happily. How to share food fairly, how to take turns with favorite sleeping Spots how to say sorry and mean it, how to help each other when someone is struggling, how to be brave even when we are scared. These are not instinctive behaviors for your species, Thundor said carefully. How did she communicate these concepts to you? She talked to us, Herrick said, as if this was the most obvious thing in the universe. She explained things and then showed us, and when we messed up, she did not hurt us or yell. She just looked disappointed and asked us to think about how we made others feel. Vixthari watched as Tandor's professional composure began to crack in the same way hers had. His species prided itself on behavioral analysis, and she could see him mentally cycling through every theory he had ever studied, finding each one inadequate to explain what stood before them. The human employed guilt-based behavioral modification on apex predator cubs. Thundor's tone suggested he was speaking a sentence he never imagined. Constructing, Nass says guilt is not bad if it helps us be better, the Valter cub explained. She says feeling bad when we hurt someone is healthy. It means we care about them. Impossible, Thundor said flatly. Your species lacks the neural architecture for guilt. You operate on dominance hierarchies and resource competition. We used to, the Vitor admitted, but Nena says we can choose to be different than our instinct. She says intelligence means we get to decide who we want to be. Vixthari felt something fundamental shifting in her understanding of behavioral development. These cubs were not just mimicking learned behaviors. They were demonstrating genuine philosophical reasoning about their own nature. I need to speak with this human immediately, Thundor declared. Nina walked into the observation chamber, carrying her cafeteria tray like she was delivering lunch to a regular break room, not entering a high-security xenopsychology assessment facility. She set the tray down on the examination table and smiled at the cubs. Hey, babies, you guys doing okay? These folks asking you weird questions. All 7 cubs rushed toward her with delighted sounds, forming a chaotic but somehow organized greeting that involved careful hugs, gentle headbutts, and what appeared to be species-specific affection displays. Na crouched down and accepted each greeting with practiced ease, her hands moving to scratch favored spots and offer reassuring pats. Vixthari's antenna trembled with disbelief. The cubs were displaying attachment behaviors that should only occur with their biologic parents or same-species caregivers. Miss Nina, Thundor began, his voice carefully controlled. I am senior behavioral scientist Thundor. I need to understand your interaction protocols with these cubs. Na glanced up at him, while simultaneously preventing the Hyloxian cub from knocking over the fruit tray. Interaction protocols. I just spend my lunch breaks with them. The night staff mentioned they were having trouble settling down, so I started visiting. You have no authorization for cub contact, Vixthari said sharply. No training in Apex predator behavioral management. No certification in cross-species developmental psychology. Yeah, I work in the cafeteria. Na agreed cheerfully, distributing fruit pieces to waiting cubs with the efficiency of someone who had done this hundreds of times. But these guys were scared and lonely, and I have 3 kids back home. Figured some basic parenting would help. Basic parenting. Thundor's fur stood on end. These are apex predators from 7 different species with completely incompatible social structures, and contradictory survival instincts. Nah. Looked genuinely confused, sure, but they are also just kids who went through something awful. They needed someone to make them feel safe. She turned to Hirks, who was trying to take more than his share of fruit. What did we talk about? Honey. Her immediately withdrew his hand. Fair portions. Everyone gets enough before anyone gets extra. That's right. Nah handed him exactly one piece. You can have seconds after everyone else gets first. Vexthari watched this exchange with growing horror. Nina had just enforced resource distribution that violated every known principle of craft. Competitive feeding behavior, and Harks had complied without aggression. How Vexthari demanded his species fights to the death over food priority. You have no dominance markers, no threat display, no physical enforcement mechanism. Nash shrugged. I just mean what I say. If I tell them something is the rule, I follow through every time. They test boundaries sometimes, like all kids do, but they figured out pretty quick that I am consistent. You establish behavioral expectations through reliability and trust. Thundor sounded like he was translating a foreign concept with apex predators. With kids, Nena corrected, kids need to know adults mean what they say, makes them feel secure. She noticed the Vitor cub looking anxious and immediately knelt beside her. What's wrong? Sweetheart, are we in trouble? The Vitor whispered. They look upset. No, baby. They are just surprised because you guys are doing so well. They did not expect you to be such good friends with each other, but you taught us how, Harry said proudly. I just reminded you that being kind feels better than being mean, Nena said, smoothing down his crest. You all did the hard work. Vexthar's thorax felt tight. Miss Nena, do you understand what you have accomplished? These cubs represent endangered species. Their successful rehabilitation affects entire planetary ecosystems, and you have achieved what our best specialists could not. Neb blinked. I mean, I just talked to them and gave them snacks. Thundor pulled up his data pad with trembling claws, scrolling through months of failed rehabilitation attempts before your intervention. Clears throat. These cubs required sedation for routine medical care. They attacked handlers. They refused food for days during dominance disputes. The Hiluxian cub nearly killed 2 specialists. Well, yeah, Nena said reasonably, accepting a drawing the Nyx cub had apparently made during art therapy. They were terrified and acting out. That's pretty normal for traumatized kids. Normal. Vexthar's voice rose several octaves. 3 of these species have never been successfully rehabilitated after rescue. We lose 70% of recovered cubs to psychological damage that prevents reintegration. Na frowned, looking genuinely troubled. For the first time. That's awful. Why? Because apex predators do not form cross-species bonds, Thundor explained slowly, as if speaking to someone who had missed fundamental education. They do not develop empathy outside their immediate genetic family. They cannot learn emotional regulation without years of specialized neural conditioning. What you have done is theoretically impossible. Nat considered this while wiping juice off the thoraxian cub's face with a napkin. Maybe your theories are wrong. The silence that followed was absolute. Vexthari felt her entire professional identity hanging in the balance of that simple question. Our theories said carefully are based on centuries of research across thousands of species. Genetic behavioral patterns are immutable. Species-specific social structures are hardwired into neural architecture, but these guys are doing great, Nina pointed out, so either your research is incomplete or kids are more adaptable than you think. Her chose that moment to approach Thunder directly, his small body showing none of the submission postures his species should display toward larger predators. Sir, can I show you something Nat taught us? Thunder nodded mutely. Hex turned to the Hyloxian cub. Kelix, can I share your favorite sleeping platform tonight? Mine has a broken heating element. Kelix, whose species was documented as incapable of voluntary resource sharing, immediately nodded. Yes, we can both fit if we curl up, thank you. Hirx touched his head to Kelix's shoulder in a gesture of gratitude that existed in neither species' behavioral repertoire. I will bring extra blankets for both of us. They negotiated resource sharing. Vexari whispered with gratitude, expressions, and future reciprocity. Planning, Nina says, asking nicely works better than fighting, the Vitor cub added. Helpfully, and sharing means everyone has friends. Thunder sat down heavily, his massive frame folding into a sitting position that suggested complete cognitive overload. You taught them to value social bond over resource competition. I taught them that being lonely sucks more than having slightly less stuff. Now corrected, pretty basic concept for anyone who has ever had friends. Their species do not have friends, Vexari insisted, though her voice lacked conviction. Now they have territorial competitors, potential mates, or prey. They were babies who needed someone to care about them, Nass said firmly, so I cared about them. I listened when they were upset. I celebrated when they did good things. I set boundaries when they were being jerks to each other. I showed up every single day. She paused. That's not complicated science. That's just being a decent person. The Nyx cub, who had been quietly observing, spoke up in her tiny voice. Nena says we deserve to be happy even though bad things happen to us. She says our past does not have to decide our future. Thunder's data pad slipped from his claws and clattered to the floor. You taught them hope and self-determination, concepts that require abstract reasoning, capabilities they should not possess for years. Nass smiled. Or maybe you just never talked to them like they were smart enough to understand. The emergency transmission from the Galactic Council arrived within the hour, projecting a shimmering holographic form into the observation chamber. Lenova materialized in her characteristic ethereal way, her luminous body pulsing with the urgency of her message. Behavioral assessment center. Her melodic voice resonated through the space. We have received your preliminary reports. Please confirm the accuracy of your data. 7 endangered species cubs displaying synchronized cooperative behavior cannot be validated without independent verification. Vexthari stepped forward, her antenna drooping with exhaustion. Council Representative Lenava, every word of our report is accurate. I have personally observed behaviors that contradict 4 decades of established xenopsychological principles. Explain the mechanism, Lenava demanded. What intervention protocol achieved these results? A human cafeteria worker spent her lunch breaks with them, Tundor said flatly. That is the entire mechanism. Lenava's glow flickered with what might have been confusion. Clarify. Are you stating that an untrained human, with no expertise in behavioral development, has succeeded where our most advanced specialists have failed? That's exactly what we're saying now, interjected, still sitting on the floor, with cubs arranged around her like some sort of interspecies story time, though I'd argue that raising 3 kids counts as expertise. Human children and apex predator cubs are incomparable, Lenava said, her form brightening with emphasis. The neural complexity alone. Kids are kids now. Interrupted calmly, they need consistency, affection, clear boundaries, and someone who actually listens to them. The number of teeth or claws doesn't change that. Impossible. Lenova stated, these species operate on fundamentally different cognitive frameworks. The Krath process dominance through pheromone detection. The clears throat. Vitor establish hierarchy through venomous displays. The Hyloxian literally consume their competition. You cannot simply apply human child rearing to, but it worked, Herrick said quietly, his small voice cutting through the council representative's assertions. Nena never tried to be like our birth parents. She was just Nena, and she made us feel like we mattered. Lava's glow dimmed slightly. Elaborate young one, the other caregivers were scared of us, the thoraxian cub said, his massive juvenile form shifting uncomfortably. We could smell their fear. They treated us like we were dangerous, so we acted dangerous. It was the only thing that made sense, but Nena was not afraid. The valor added. Even when I extended my spines by accident, she just calmly asked me to retract them and explained that we do not use weapons inside because someone could get hurt. She did not punish you for a threat display. Vexari could not keep the disbelief from her voice. She said it was an accident and taught me breathing exercises to help me stay calm, the Vitor explained. Then she stayed with me until I felt safe again. Thundor pulled up another data file, his claws shaking slightly. According to our protocols, threat displays from Ver cubs require immediate isolation and neural dampening to prevent cascade aggression. Your protocols made them worse, Nass said. Simply, isolation scared them more. They needed connection, not punishment. Connection. Lenova repeated the word as if testing a foreign concept. You established emotional bonds across species barriers that should not exist. I established trust. Na corrected. I showed up every day. I kept my promises. I never lied to them, even when the truth was hard. I treated them like people who deserved respect. They are cubs, Vixari protested, juveniles who require structured behavioral conditioning. They are individuals, Na countered with thoughts and feelings and personalities. Kelix loves drawing. Her asks amazing questions about everything. The little one, she gestured to the Nyx cub, has the best sense of humor once she feels comfortable enough to show it. Lenova's form pulsed rapidly, a sign of significant processing. You individualized your approach based on personality rather than species. Templates, well, yeah, they're all different. What works for one doesn't necessarily work for another, but you have no telepathic abilities, Lenova pressed. No pheromone sensing, no biochemical feedback mechanisms. How did you assess their individual psychological states? Na looked genuinely puzzled by the question. I watched them. I listened to them. I paid attention to their body language and how they responded to things. It's not that complicated. It is precisely that. Complicated, thunder rumbled we have. Entire departments dedicated to decoding apex predator behavioral signals, teams of specialists analyzing micro expressions and hormonal outputs. Maybe you're overthinking it, nah. Suggested. Most of the time, kids will just tell you what they need if you ask, and actually listen to the answer. Apex predator cubs do not possess the linguistic development for self-reporting emotional states. Vexari said automatically, we do now. Herrick said proudly, Nina taught us words for feelings. Before I just knew I felt bad. Now I know the difference between angry and scared and sad and frustrated. Knowing the difference helps me figure out what I need. Lenova's glow had taken on an intense quality that suggested she was recording every word you taught them. Emotional literacy across 7 species with completely different neurological structures. I taught them that feelings have names and that naming them helps. Na said. Same thing I taught my kids back home when they were toddlers having meltdowns. This cannot be replicated, Vexari said desperately. This is clearly a unique situation, dependent on variables we cannot control. What variables? Na asked. Caring about them, being patient, following through on what I say. Those aren't unique variables, those are just basic requirements for taking care of kids. The Haluxian cub calyx moved closer to Lenova's projection. Can I ask a question? Proceed, young one. Why did everyone give up on us so quickly? The other caregivers tried for maybe a week and then said we were too damaged. Nah. Tried for months and never stopped believing we could do better. The silence that followed was crushing. Vexthari felt it like a physical weight. They had given up, all of them. The best minds in xenopsychology had looked at these cubs and seen only their trauma, their aggression, their seemingly insurmountable behavioral problems. We believe the data, Thunder said quietly. The research said apex predator cubs from traumatic backgrounds could not be rehabilitated. The research was wrong, Nass said without anger, just stating fact, or maybe incomplete, maybe no one ever tried just being there for them consistently. The resource investment Vexari began. I spent 45 minutes a day with them. Nah. Interrupted. 45 minutes of sitting the floor, talking to them, playing simple games, listening to their problems. That's the resource investment. That changed everything. Lenova's form brightened suddenly. The implications are extraordinary. If your methods can be systematized and taught to other caregivers, we could revolutionize endangered species recovery across the galaxy. I don't know about systematizing anything, Nass said dubiously. I just did what felt right. That is precisely the problem, Lava said. Intive caregiving cannot be standardized or replicated at scale. Sure it can, Nad disagreed. You teach people to actually see the cubs as individuals, to care about their emotional well-being, not just their behavioral compliance, to be patient and consistent and honest. Those aren't mysterious human secrets. Those are just how you should treat anyone you're responsible for. But our specialists are trained in those exact principles. Vexari protested. Are they now? Challenged. Because from what these cubs told me, your specialists were more worried about following protocols than about how the cubs actually felt. They were managing behaviors instead of supporting individuals. Her nodded vigorously. The specialist always talked about us to each other, but never to us like we could not understand. Nena talks to us like we are smart enough to have conversations. Because you are, Nena said simply. You're all incredibly smart, you just needed someone to notice. Thundor stood abruptly, his massive form moving toward the chamber exit. I need to review 30 years of rehabilitation protocols. Everything we thought we understood about post-T trauma development may be fundamentally flawed. Lenova's projection expanded, filling the chamber with urgent luminescence. This situation requires immediate escalation. Nina of Earth, you are hereby classified as a strategic xenopsychological asset. The Council must study your methodologies before we lose any more endangered cubs to failed rehabilitation. Na frowned. I'm not an asset, I'm a cafeteria worker who likes kids. You are the first being in recorded history to successfully rehabilitate multiple apex predator species simultaneously. Lenova countered, your techniques must be documented, analyzed, and distributed to every recovery center in the galaxy. My techniques are just basic decency. Na protested, then we need training. Modules on basic decency, Thundor said. From the doorway, his voice heavy with resignation. Because clearly our advanced degrees and specialized certifications missed something fundamental. Vixari was scrolling through decades of research papers on her data pad, her antenna trembling. The foundation of our entire field assumes that species-specific protocols are essential. That behavioral modification requires matching the caregiver's biological capabilities to the cub's neurological expectations. Maybe that's where you went wrong, Na suggested gently. You were so focused on being the right species that you forgot to just be kind. The next cub climbed into Na's lap, her tiny form curling trustingly against the human's. Jest. Na says kindness is universal. It does not need translation. Profound philosophical statement from a 3-month-old Nix, Lenova observed. Their species typically requires 18 months to develop abstract reasoning. She's smart, Na said, stroking the cub's soft fur. They're all smart, they just needed someone to treat them that way. Thunder returned with several other behavioral specialists, all of whom stopped dead at the sight of 7 apex predator cubs peacefully coexisting around a single human. By all the ancestors, one whispered. The reports were accurate. Begin documentation protocols, Lenova commanded. I want every interaction recorded and analyzed. Nina, we need you to demonstrate your caregiving approach with a control group. A what now? Na looked alarmed. We have 12 more rescued cubs arriving next week, Vixari explained, all exhibiting severe behavioral problems. Standard protocols have already failed. We need to observe whether your approach works with other individuals. Na bit her lip, looking at the cubs around her. I can't just experiment on traumatized kids. You would not be experimenting, Thundor said urgently. You would be offering them the same chance you gave these 7. Without intervention, they will likely be deemed unrovable. What happens to unrovable cubs? Na asked quietly. The specialists exchanged uncomfortable glances. Vixari finally spoke. Permanent isolation in specialized containment. They cannot be returned to the wild, cannot be integrated into recovery habitats, and pose too much danger for standard care facilities. That's horrible, Nena said. Flatly, they're just scared babies. Scared babies with lethal capabilities. Vixari reminded her. We cannot risk. Handler casualties, then teach your handlers to not be scared, Nass said. Fear makes everything worse. These guys knew I wasn't afraid of them, so they didn't have to be scary to protect themselves. Herrick stood up, his small body straightening with determination. We can help. We can show the new cubs that this place is safe, that now will take care of them like she took care of us. The other cubs vocalized agreement. Their various species, specific sounds, somehow harmonizing into unified purpose. Lenova's glow intensified. The cubs are volunteering to assist in rehabilitation. This is unprecedented. Cooperative behavior across species lines. They're being good friends, Nina corrected, helping others who are going through what they went through. That's just empathy. Apex predators are not capable of empathy, Vexthari said. Weakly, yours weren't, Nass said. Mine are. 3 months later, the Galactic Behavioral Assessment Center had 42 successfully rehabilitated cubs, learning what Nena called basic kindness during their daily sessions. Vexthari was writing her 5th research paper titled The Failure of Genetic Behavioral Determinism, while Thundor coordinated requests from 73 different facilities begging for human caregiving consultants. Na had negotiated better coffee in the break room and a raise, then went right back to her cafeteria shifts. The council wants to name the methodology after you, Vexthari said, watching Na distribute afternoon snacks to a mixed group of cubs who were peacefully working on art projects. Absolutely not, Na said firmly. It's not a methodology, it's just caring about them. Hark's now officially designated as an ambassador to newly rescued cubs looked up from his drawing. Na says the best teaching is showing people they matter. She changed the whole galaxy by just showing up. Every day, I made some kids feel safe. Nena corrected, then laughed as they Nick's cub tried to steal an extra cookie. Same thing I do for my own kids, nothing fancy. Lenova's daily report to the council concluded. Human subject remains unaware of cosmic significance.